Chag Sameach. I've come to see that everyone has a mantra, whether they call it that or not, a saying, a refrain, a dicho, words to live by, something which helps them center and refocus, relax and renew. And while there are many pieces of Jewish wisdom that I'm fond of, I didn't realize until recently that the guiding phrase I return to again and again is this: Ufros aleinu Sukkot Shlomecha, spread over us a tabernacle, a sukkah of your peace. This phrase comes from the evening prayer, and it invites us to settle down, to approach the uncertainty of the dark hours with confidence, to tone down any worries, so that we can rest peacefully under that Sukkot Shalom, that protective shelter. And voila, before us, the Sukkah in all its glory, larger than life, showcasing the bounty and magnificence of nature, of God's handiwork. And because it is a tangible manifestation of the word sukkah, inevitably I want to associate this structure and all those like it with Sukkot Shalom, with peace, and even more so in its larger connotation with wholeness. The irony of the sukkah, any sukkah, is that it is by definition fragile. Tradition teaches that it is meant to be insubstantial, open to the elements. One requirement is the ability to see the stars through its leafy roof, and in every sense, the sukkah is temporary. So if we want to strengthen that connection between sukkah and shalom, we are going to need to step in, because a sukkah will never be entirely whole, complete, or perfect. Our ancestors knew this, and so they used a creative way to problem solve. Every night of Sukkot, they would welcome a biblical spiritual exemplar so that they could focus on the life of that individual or couple and emerge from the interaction with a deeper appreciation for the gifts that their lives embodied. For example, Abraham and Sarah represent chesed, loving kindness. Isaac and Rebekah represent strength, and so on. For our ancestors, and perhaps even for us, these biblical figures are so much a part of our lives that as we entertain their spiritual qualities, we become more mindful of our own. And then if we are thoughtful, our attitude shifts to taking action. In this way, Sukkot capitalizes on the emotional work we did during the high holidays to reset our priorities and values. Each year, I like to expand our Sukkot guest list to shake up the conversation and to learn from those who are living their values. And with the world such as it is, I think we've lost sight of how to care for others, to create a shelter of peace amidst the forces that buffet society. So now, amidst the flowers and the gourds and the pumpkins, let's make some room for Sian Balak, the president of Barnard College, for a conversation about living one's values. While the abortion debate is being played out across the nation in political arenas, there is a crisis developing in individual lives in real time as autonomy and decision-making power is being stripped from women. On Friday, we learned of Dr. Balak's plans to ensure that the Barnard campus will continue to be a safe space for students by ensuring that students will have every reproductive care option available to them, whether it is continuing a pregnancy or making a plan for adoption or termination, be it surgical or through medication. The school will offer and, if necessary, fund a full range of women's health care. President Balak's actions take the pressure off of students who have to juggle multiple factors and personal decisions, including how to manage the financial cost of care, whether it is to continue a pregnancy or not. And Barnard also models how academic institutions can support the whole student. In this hour of our nation's history, when the imposition of someone else's ideology impinges on one's own, on one's autonomy and one's health, having an academic institution stand up for its students now, when it counts, affirms that whatever their choice, they are valued and protected, creating a Sukkot Shalom, a shelter of compassion. As Barnard offers a sense of peace to individuals, peace between nations draws our focus and concern every day, and with it the oppressive regimes that weaponize power to repress their own citizens. So I'd like to invite Natan Sharansky to join us under the sukkah's canopy to speak from experience about how he responded to repression when he lived in the former Soviet Union. You may recall that he worked alongside the Nobel Prize laureate Andrei Sakharov to demand that the USSR live up to its international human rights obligations. And in the years when he was a prisoner of conscience, a refusnik, the name Natan Sharansky became a household word and an inspiration for all who struggle for democracy. I want to hear what Sharansky would have to say about the most recent Nobel Peace Prize laureates named this week, who are grouped together because their work intersects. The organization Memorial spotlights Soviet state repression. The Center for Civil Liberties in Ukraine pursues accountability for war crimes. And the third is Ales Bialyatsky, a jailed Belarusian activist. Naming Bialyatsky as a Nobel laureate calls attention to the autocratic, repressive regime, which was largely overlooked until it became a staging ground for Russia's incursion into Ukraine. Bialyatsky's imprisonment under false charges is reminiscent of others who defied repressive governments like Nelson Mandela and Alexei Navalny, and of course, Natan Sharansky. When Sharansky received the Genesis Prize in 2020, he said, "Freedom is never more than a generation away from extinction. It is not passed to our children in our bloodstream. It must be fought for and protected and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like to live when men were free." His example can teach us how to address repression from the inside out. We know that repression pushes people from their countries of origin. According to the UN Refugee Agency Commission, at the end of 2021, 89.3 million people had been displaced from their homes as a result of persecution, conflict, violence, and human rights violations. And 21.3 million of them were refugees. So join me in the sukkah as we put out another chair, to welcome a man who is not known to you by name. I'll call him Hamid, just to protect his privacy. You may recall that several years ago, through Hayas, Emanu-El partnered with Rodef Sholem to sponsor refugees to help their transition to a new chapter of life in the United States. As we chat with Hamid, we'll learn that having left the persecution of his home country behind, he has created a wonderful future for himself here, which includes English language skills, a job which allows him to be financially self-sufficient and gives him dignity and purpose, as well as the contentment of living in a nation that is more stable than the one he left. This sense of peace only came about with the involvement of dozens of individual efforts, whether through donations of items or time. Along the way, volunteers throughout our faith communities introduced him to simple things in daily life, the subway system, how to navigate the healthcare system, where to buy groceries and how to pay his phone bill, helped him with a job search, and thereafter prepped him for an interview. I want to welcome Hamid again and hear more about his success, because that could be a prelude to renewing our own compassion for those who seek a better life and to recognize the part we can play in their journey. When we sit under an outdoor sukkah, it quivers with each passing wind, and we feel fragile and exposed. But that discomfort pales in comparison to how daunting it must be to leave one's country of origin to face an uncertain future. Without the stability of what we often take for granted, a home, a job, and the knowledge to help us navigate life's challenges, how would we fare? As immigrants are being bused to the city in overwhelming numbers to make a political point, how can we individually respond to their needs to create a shelter of peace that will enable them to exhale, even briefly? Speaking of tolerance, right outside our doors on Fifth Avenue, 2 other holidays are being observed. Columbus Day, celebrating the discovery of America, and Indigenous Peoples Day, which was created as a response to Columbus Day, to recognize the violent history of colonization, which includes a loss of tribal land, the loss of their languages, their poor access to health care and education. So I want to invite one more guest who understands the urgent concern of perpetuating his people's customs, traditions, language, and culture in diaspora, and that is the Dalai Lama. There is an often counted story of a meeting between the Dalai Lama and representative from the various branches of Judaism. And it was called because he wanted to understand how Jews have successfully perpetuated Judaism despite living in exile for countless years. As we sit under our sukkah and use the ancient symbols of the festival, the lulav and etrog, living and entertaining and sleeping in the fragile booth as untold generations of our ancestors did, let us welcome others who seek to learn how to restore their ancestral ways for the sake of their future. And may we also learn from each of our guests of the pressing need to create a sukkah of strength and comfort, connection and hope. Ufros aleinu sukkot shlomecha, spread over us a tabernacle of peace. May we all dwell under its protection and continue to offer its peace to those who seek it. Chag Sameach.